Have you ever felt like you're too tired to be the person you want to be? Like you have all these ideas, ambitions, and versions of yourself inside you, but not enough energy to actually bring them to life?
If that's you, you're in the right place. Welcome back to Too Much Apparently, a podcast for deep feeling, overthinking, emotionally overloaded humans who've been told they're too much, apparently.
We're Alice and Carly, two deep feeling therapists figuring out how to live in a world that often feels like a lot.
This isn't therapy or advice, just honest, messy, human conversations about life, healing, and our own brains. And if you want more of the conversation, we're building a little community over on Substack with journal prompts, community chats, live event updates, and fellow muchlings to connect with. Go to toomuchapparently.com for all the links.
So let's get into it. I'm not entirely sure why I selected this one for today, given that it feels a bit present at the moment.
Pretty close to the bone. Yeah.
That's how I would phrase it too. I've had to take a mini break from my clinical client work just for health reasons and bits and bobs. And so, yeah, it feels really close to me because I'm very much currently sitting with difficult feelings around who I want to be and kind of who I know that I am, but I can't be that. I kind of feel like this episode is a bit like knowing you're not living up to your potential, not in a way that it's your fault because of things outside of your control, but in a way, well, for me, that feels almost worse because they're not in my control. I can't do anything about it.
Yeah. When you said my potential, and I'm saying this about me, not you, because I have this similar thing of like, oh, I've got all this potential. And when I was younger, and still now, people would say to me all the time, you've got so much potential. And I think that made me feel quite important and special. And, I guess it's part of what I was praised for. But I think I can beat myself up sometimes because I'm not reaching my potential. But just hearing you put it the way you did, I was like, that isn't my potential. That's somebody else's idea of my potential when they discount the struggles that I have with energy, which I have had all of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, super uncomfortable because I like to be in denial about my capacity. And so as we record this is my last working day before I have a week off, which I normally like to take a break every 6 weeks, but at the moment I'm working kind of in 8-week blocks. So I'm more tired than I would normally be. And I am attending a group therapy workshop to try and catch up on some of the hours that I've got to do for my master's for Thursday and Friday. So it also kind of feels like my week off isn't actually even a week off because half of it's taken up with this intense emotional work that I know it will be because that's what this group therapy is like. So yeah, I'm also super tired. And I guess sitting with that discomfort of what do I actually have the capacity for?
Mm-hmm.
It feels really hard. And I sit with clients struggling with this all the time and it is really hard.
Yeah, I see lots of people in my work struggling with this as well. And one of the reasons I think that lots of people actually relate to this who are in, a lot of people don't really like the terms, but gifted or like exceptional communities. I wouldn't class myself as that, although there are certain definitions that would. However, there seems to be this common theme that if as a younger person, you are someone who is seen to have lots of potential or be really intelligent or be really creative or be really emotionally switched on, when there's something about you as a child that just seems above. I don't know how to explain it. That just seems like you're advanced in certain areas. Some people think giftedness is just about kind of like academic intelligence, and it isn't. So if you're someone who's seen as being above their age and therefore great things are kind of expected of you, because gifted, exceptional people can actually tend to fall on the more sensitive side of things. They're just brought up with this belief that they're going to be super successful or have these big careers, that lots of things are expected of them. And that is such a difficult notion and such a shattering of a person's self-image when they then find themselves in therapy, like unable to just hold down a job even. or a job that they're doing is maybe seen as menial and people can't understand it when they expected kind of greatness and big things. You can see it quite a lot in those kinds of populations and communities. And also, I work a lot with chronic illness and chronically ill myself. You see it a lot in neurodivergent communities. When you are someone who just lives with various challenges that take a lot from you, it does massively affects what you can do, what you can achieve, what your capacity is. And I think that's why, for me, achieving your potential doesn't feel external to me. I don't feel like it was something that was put on me as such. It comes from internal. It's kind of like I know that I have the intelligence, the creativity to do a lot and probably to achieve a lot, but I can't do it because of my capacity issues. And yeah, I think the reason when we came into this episode why I was a bit like, oh, why did I choose this episode title for today? Is, I'm not really connecting with the emotional side of it now, but if I were to, I would get quite emotional about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can feel it as we're talking, and I'm not having to take time off for health reasons, but still, I can feel the emotion of it and the struggle of it and fear in it as well.
Mm.
But yeah, the fear of, can I achieve the things that I want to achieve, feel like I need to achieve, whether that's on a practical level or whether it's more about identity. And I think identity is a huge piece
Hmm.
here. I almost feel like if I could go back in time and say to my parents, like, please don't praise me for being so clever, encourage other aspects of me. Like, it was wonderful while it was happening, but the costs have been enormous.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Then as an adult, and especially, I mean, you mentioned that you feel like you have lived your life tired for most of your life.
Yeah, I just always feel like I've had less energy. Other people can keep going when I need to stop. When we would go on school residential trips that often involved lots of walking in the countryside, I would always be back of the line and
Mm.
tired and like, oh, when is this over? And it wasn't laziness. It was like I didn't have that physical energy. And I still don't have a lot of energy. I said before, like my husband does most of the housework, he does most of the cooking, he does most of the childcare. And as a woman, that feels intensely uncomfortable to say. I'm just imagining all these women listening and being like, oh my God, don't you clean your house? Don't you? Whatever. But yeah, I suppose it feels like there's another status thing there. And I think there is. I think there's a bonding thing for wives and mothers around, oh, useless men, they don't do anything. And I'm just sat there like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm okay with it because I feel like my personality is one that, like, I am really drawn to slow living, not because I need to, but because that is my pace. I've
Mm.
said several times before, like as a kid, I would be a bookworm and sitting quietly with a book, love it. So in some ways, it's okay. But I think do you know what I think it is? I think one particular part of it is the clash of autistic flow state and really being in this place of like, yes, I can do this, or like the ADHD creativity of like, yeah, all these ideas and or just really wanting to be deep into something and having to tear myself away because if I don't get I mean, really, if I don't get 9 hours of sleep, I am tired. If I get less than 8 hours sleep, I want to cry when I wake up.
Same. Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's so horrible. So I've been watching Love Island all summer and because it finished last night, I'm now like, brilliant. I can go back to going to bed at 9 o'clock because it's on 9 till 10. Because I really need that. Like it massively impacts my mood and I try and resist it and I try and argue and I try and push it. But every morning I will have not had enough sleep and I don't want to get out of bed and I just want to cry. And
Hmm.
that's no one wants to start their day like that.
No, no, yeah, I'm the same. And there's confusion and there's envy around people who can have a bad night's sleep and just go about their day. They're tired, but they go about their day. They get a good night's sleep the next night and everything's fine. But yeah, for some of us, that's just not the case. I think when you wake up not feeling refreshed after a 12-hour sleep, then having 7.5 hours sleep is a big deal.
Mm.
And same, I wake up with a, oh my gosh, how am I gonna cope? How am I gonna get through the day? Which then just sounds a bit mad when you consider some people would consider 7.5 hours sleep like a luxury.
I always think there's when people say to me they've had 7 hours sleep and that's enough, I'm like, no, no, no. I'm sure I saw some research not even that long ago that actually women need, like, the 8 hours sleep thing is men and women actually need nine.
Ah, right, yeah.
So, yeah, or maybe even 10.
Mm, yeah. Well, what is it like when you have the desire to do things, but you don't have the capacity to do the things?
I feel like I should have a more articulate answer than just horrible.
No?
It's horrible.
Yeah, well, that can be the answer.
I think it very quickly gets tangled up in laziness,
Mhm.
even though I fundamentally do not believe in laziness.
Mm.
And I'm sure we've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. There's a really good article by Devon Price about why laziness isn't a thing. If you've never heard anyone say that before. But even though I know that, even though, that is firmly one of my values or beliefs, I still very quickly get caught up in I'm not doing enough,
Mhm. Yes.
which
Yeah.
compounds the horribleness.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not just a neutral statement, is it? It's not just a case of what is it like when you want to do things but can't do the things. I don't know that we see it as then can't. There's almost a voice in our head that says "Mm," or won't, or like you say, like brings in the idea of laziness, or I'm just kidding myself, or I just need to get on with it, or other people do it. So you just need to get on with it, or this is just in your head. Like there's so many different things that someone might say to themselves to ultimately dismiss that fact. And I think that's why it is horrible because it's not just a neutral factual statement, it's one that is going to connect to people's stories about what it means that they're not able to do the things that they want to do, want to be able to do, want to achieve, regardless of what that thing is.
Yeah. And it's making me think about grief work and having to give up on what you can't do. And it's also making me think about self care, but not in the cookie cutter, this is what works for everybody kind of way, but really being curious and experimenting with specifically what works for you. So, like the getting enough sleep thing can still be an issue for me, like I just said, but I feel like I've made a lot of progress in it. So, revenge, bedtime, procrastination used to be a huge problem for me, so things like working through things like that, like why am I refusing to get enough sleep? And, for me in the past, it was really that didn't feel like I had enough time for me in my day or in my life. So I would steal it from myself by staying up late and getting time to myself late at night.
Hmm.
Um, so there's that piece. So that, yeah, so there's the grief piece. There's the what can I do to change it piece. And then I was just thinking about all these things that we want to do. What do we think they're going to give us? And will they actually give us that? Or is there something else that might give us those things that doesn't require the same levels of effort? And I don't think it's like an either or for any of those three. I imagine that for most people, it's going to be a combination of the three for different things.
Mm. Yeah, I can see the answers to that kind of being like yes and no.
Mm.
Some of that is going to be imagined things that we think will give us this thing that actually maybe it won't at all. We just think it will.
Hmm.
And then there are other things where if we were able to do that, it genuinely would have a meaningful impact on our life. I'm just thinking, for an example, a person who is quite lonely and isolated, who wants to be the sort of person that can go out and see friends socially, but their body can't let them, their body needs to stay home.
Mm.
And that might be an example where actually, yeah, that desire would make a meaningful impact to your life. Like, of course, you're going to want that, you're allowed to want.
Mm.
And then I can also see situations where we might have certain ideas in our head. Let's take one of my desires to write a book, for example. There's nothing wrong with wanting to write a book. Like, if I want to write a book and I really wanted to, could I find a way to make that work? But is that something that I actually want and would make a meaningful impact and difference on my life? Or is it something that I think that I want because I think it will give me XYZ, for
Yeah.
example? so that they feel like good questions to ask yourself because they might reveal some things that maybe we're holding on to that we don't need to hold on to anymore. But it can also highlight the things that actually are important and do matter and would make a difference if we could have more of that. Or where there is, you mentioned the word grief, where there's grief. What if we genuinely can't have more of that thing?
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe it's grief and or acceptance as well. What I'm partly thinking about for me is it would be great if I was not so tired and I could see more clients. That would
Hmm.
be great for me. That would have a really positive impact on my life. But I cannot.
Hmm.
I cannot. And I think there are absolutely situations where there are like practical difficulties. Like if you can't work at all, that is going to have a significant financial impact on your life. There are going to be financial things that are not available to you because you can't earn the money.
Hmm.
And that is hard. And so there's grief in that, letting go of who you could be if you could earn money. There's going to be acceptance as part of that grieving. Yeah, I guess it feels like there's just something about exploring what options there are for each thing.
Mm.
I think the thing with this episode is it feels a bit, there's part of me that can really quickly go into despair about it.
Yeah. I feel a little bit like I'm kind of tiptoeing around the subject, like, oh, how can I talk about this meaningfully and in a way that maybe some people really need to hear or connect with or not feel alone with, whilst also recognizing that, oh, yeah, this is a bit tricky and challenging and touches on some really, yeah, raw, like despairing, kind of difficult parts. But I think that's why it is important. You mentioned the word acceptance, and I can't even tell you how much the word acceptance kind of features in my own emotional reflections and growth and therapy and things like that. I'm kind of like, I have such a strong side of me that is so resistant. It's like it's almost anti accept. No, I will not accept this. I've struggled a lot with acceptance as a concept, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that. But I sort of think, yeah, there's a way we can talk about it that kind of honors. I mean, earlier when I asked you that question, you just said horrible. Like it does just feel horrible. And, there's part of me that kind of wants to be able to bring in like hope, bring in hopeful aspects. And sometimes you also just need to acknowledge, yeah, this does just feel horrible.
Yeah. I think to go back a little bit to the acceptance bit, I think sometimes I say, uh, don't get me wrong, absolutely 100% also have resistance to acceptance sometimes. But maybe there's different kinds of acceptance. I think sometimes when people hear acceptance, they hear, I'm okay with it. Whereas what I mean is, I am agreeing that the situation is what it is. So there are
Yes.
absolutely times where I refuse to accept something. I don't know if I know it internally or not. I guess there will be times where I know it and other times where I don't know it, where what I'm essentially doing is arguing that the facts are not the facts.
Mm, yeah.
Um, and I think when you said about, the part that was like so resistant to acceptance, what popped into my head is like anti-grief is like, I'm not willing for this to be true. I'm not willing to accept this. I'm not willing to go there with what this is going to mean for me. Yeah. And I could, of course, we can't, grief is a process. And some of the things that we have to let go of are things that we so desperately want and so desperately want to believe that we can do. And yeah, changing your identity is so hard.
Oh, yeah, gosh. Yeah. So you mentioned there about grief, acceptance, changing of identity. And I think identity is really key in this because if you have grown up with certain beliefs about yourself, certain wants, certain desires, things on your bucket list, things that you expected yourself to do, to see, to experience, to achieve, when you then can't do that or be that person, I think it becomes a real threat to your identity and sense of self because we kind of define, rightly or wrongly, sometimes we define ourselves in terms of what we do. So I don't know, you meet someone and probably one of the first few questions is, oh, so what do you do? Meaning, what do you do for your work as a key indicator of who you are? so much emphasis is placed on who we are is what we do,
Yeah.
which isn't true, but that tends to be how society kind of functions. I would argue who we are is how we are in the world, but we place a lot of emphasis on what we do as to who we are. So if we struggle to do the doing, what does that mean about us? And this is where I think grief and confusion and depression can come into play. One of the things I wanted to mention is there's lots of different ways to think about identity and to think about the self. But one popular theory is called Rogers' theory on the self, which splits the self into three components. So there's our real self, which is our real self, kind of like who we are in our current daily lived experience. Our self concept is then how we see and understand ourselves. So that links more with our self esteem. So there's who we are, how we see and feel about who we are. And then there's the ideal self, which is who we want to be.
Okay.
And sometimes I'll do this with clients where we'll look at those different columns and actually write out how we see and feel about ourselves, who we feel we are today, and who we want to be or who we wish that we could be. And the theory suggests that when those three things align, when there's congruence between the three things, that's when we feel like our more authentic self. We have a stronger sense of identity and we're more likely to have positive mental health outcomes. Whereas when there's a gap between who we are, who we want to be, how we see ourselves, and then there's incongruence between those three, that creates distress, it creates confusion, it creates depression. And I actually remember when I was training to be a therapist, and this is just something a lecturer said. I don't actually know if there's an evidence basis for this statement. So just to make you aware of that. But one of my lecturers once claimed that one of the main causes of depression is that incongruence between who you think you are and who you want to be.
Hmm.
So that just feels so important for what we're talking about now in terms of who we see ourselves as we are and who we see ourselves like who we know we could be, who we believe that we could be. But
Mhm.
when we can't be that because of other limiting factors, yeah, is it any wonder that then we end up anxious, depressed, low self esteem, confused, lost, not feeling kind of good about ourselves? And where I see this fitting for me and where the not wanting to accept part comes in is I think I just continually keep trying to get back to my ideal self, the person I know I could be.
Mm.
So I'll go through a period of burnout, of having to withdraw away, of having to not do much. But my focus for recovery is so that then I can be the person I know I can be. But then,
So even in recovery, there's still the striving.
yeah, it's almost I need to recover so that I
Mm.
can then get back to be the person that I want to be and do the things that I want to
Mm.
do.
Mm.
And it's almost like there is a part of me believes that there is some answer out there, that there is some solution, that if I could just find a better way of working, a better way of organizing my time, a way to earn more, but also work less, or a way to do this or a way to do that, that somewhere there is this solution that if I just employ that solution, then I can be the person that I know I can be.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the stage of brewing some content at the moment. I've not written it yet, but I can feel it brewing. And one of the things is there is no magic answer. Partly when you were talking, I was thinking about, well, of course we base so much on what we do because we live in a capitalist society. So
Mm-hmm.
society is geared up in so many ways, both on a conscious level and an unconscious level, to value what we do and not much else really. Yeah, but again, I think we're constantly sold this idea that if we buy this thing or try this thing or do this routine or that routine or the other routine or do weird shaking to get rid of your trauma or, whatever, screaming or, yeah, that there's some magic fix that will just make you feel wonderful. And I kind of feel like I'm sat on the edge of society a bit at the moment. Like this has been going on for years now, but like watching really capable women, and it tends to be it does tend to be women burning out and burning out and burning out and burning out. And sometimes there's a real tension for me when I'm working because I feel like, well, these people are paying me to help them get better. And I am doing things to help them get better. And I can't do anything about the society that we live in that is burning people out at a faster and faster rate. And I almost do, like I can feel my hands want to push the words back into my mouth and be like, don't say this. And of course it comes from a, a despairing part of me, and that isn't all of me. But I just feel, yeah, like there's a louder and louder and louder alarm in me that's like there is something really wrong with our society and it has to stop and it has to change
Hmm.
because this just is not working.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Cheery. Sorry, that's
I agree. I agree with kind of everything that you've said. Sometimes though that's part of the work, isn't it? Because just relating what you said back to me saying that there's still a part of me that sometimes just believes that there is a solution out there. That's the part of me that can't quite reach acceptance yet. Whereas there are other parts of me that knows that there isn't one. And actually, like you were saying, there's a part of me that gets increasingly frustrated at the amount of people on social media selling fixes,
yeah.
especially take this course to rewire your nervous system, take
Mhm.
this course to move trauma from out of your body. And there's just like so many courses that make, I don't know how anyone has the gall to make like such massive proclamations about what their thing's going to do for someone. And I don't know how you dare. Oh, it's just so much bigger than that. It's so much more bigger.
I actually
But
get excited sometimes. Sorry, I know you're kind of mid flow, but
yeah,
with AI and everyone's like, AI is going to take over therapy. Sometimes I'm like, maybe AI is going to speed up people's realization that there isn't a quick fix and that they do need something more than AI organizing your thoughts or whatever. And that actually the real work is deep relational work because
yes.
that's what I come back to over and over again. The answer is deep relational work that helps you reconnect with who you really are and helps you live that in, out and about in the world. And that, again, I'm positioning that as the answer. I know it's obviously it's more complicated than that. Obviously, I guess like what I'm holding as part of that is relational work has so many aspects to it, and part of it
So
is
join
letting
mine
go.
analysis course
Yeah,
on
6 week.
6-week course to fully connect with your deep self, selling now for only £10,000. You will be transformed by the end of it.
People would buy it. People would buy it, I'm telling you. I just feel like we have to move away from this idea that there is an answer. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. It's like, so I know I have made movement with it because in the past I used to get sick and sick and sick and sick. And now I don't get sick all the time anymore.
Mm,
So I know I'm shifting out of it. But yeah, there's still more to do. And it has meant giving up on things. And that has been hard.
yes. Yeah, I don't think it's that there aren't things that we can learn about or do for ourselves that can make the cycles less often or less severe. But if you are someone who is more sensitive, depending on your neurotype, if you live with chronic illness, sometimes we can get into the state of how can I stop finding myself here rather
Mm.
than actually maybe we will keep finding ourselves here, and that is where there are things that we might be able to do and learn that, yes, can make them happen less often, or the symptoms or intensity, could be less, or like you gave the example of like getting physically sick less often. And then also there is, you've got to keep bringing it back to grief and acceptance. But I think that they're really hard to do when having limited capacity can mean we just end up feeling inadequate. And when
Mm.
our culture promotes productivity, busyness, ambition, success as kind of the pinnacle of what we should all be doing, we often find ourselves comparing our output against that standard. And I agree with what you were saying before about our society making people sick. I think it makes non chronically ill people sick. I think it makes neurotypical people sick. I think, yeah, everyone is impacted and can suffer by how things are set up. But for some of us, the impact can just be so great. And obviously, you and I are now talking about this from a position that some would say is privileged in the sense that, okay, we talk about needing to have regular time off and periods of burnout and things like that. And yet, other people will see us as being capable of doing a lot more than what other people are maybe able to do. But there's just something about continuing with this idea that we should be able to do more, and at the same time, many of us have had specific goals and dreams. And yeah, I'm just thinking about how it comes back to identity again. I've kind of always classed myself as someone who is, kind of intelligent, capable, definitely ambitious, adventurous, and filled with ideas and wants to get so much out of life. I could almost live 100 lives with how many things I'm interested in and how many things I want to do. And yet I struggle to just live my one. I don't really even know what it is that I'm trying to say here, except it is then very hard when you're not doing those things to kind of not internalize that about that saying something about you.
Yeah. So what came up for me there is I think part of the process for me is I have a rebellious part that is like, I'm not going to do what you expect of me. I'm not going to be Superwoman. I'm not going to be this high flying, mega achieving. No, I've got my one wild and precious life and I'm going to spend it lying in the long grass. I don't have the same. I was listening to something the other day and someone was saying, like, oh, I couldn't just spend all day lying around. And I was like, I can. Yeah. I can quite happily lie in bed and just, yeah, read my book or watch a TV show or whatever. It feels like there's a rebellious and quite it feels like community driven part. Not that I'm driving any communities with it, but in that maybe I'll be a different kind of woman then. Maybe I'll be a different kind of, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I was going to say hero, which feels a bit self important, but yeah, yeah, just maybe I'll live a different kind of life. As I'm saying it, I can hear I'm not letting go of the being important or being special piece that I think is perhaps behind a lot of the striving.
Mm,
But maybe there's different ways to go about it. And it's not just that, there is more, about having read about what people regret on their deathbed, for example. It's not about, oh, I wish I spent more time at work. I wish achieved more of X, Y, and Z. It's usually, I wish I'd had better relationships with my family. I wish I'd spent more times with my children. So they're the things that I try and invest in.
mm.
But there's no avoiding the grief, I guess, is almost the thing that I want people to go away from this episode with, even if it annoys the hell out of them. Yeah. As it does me. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that sounded a bit like coming back to some sort of acceptance then. So before you were talking about, you mentioned acceptance and you said something along the lines of accepting can be seen as giving up, giving in. People can see it as resignation or like approval or, oh, I accept this. I am okay with this situation.
Yeah.
I like this situation. Or it means I've decided nothing can ever improve and this is it. I think that is where the resistance to acceptance can come from because what we believe that kind of what acceptance is.
Yeah.
Whereas if we were able to think about acceptances, this is the capacity that I have today, whether or not I believe I should have more, that this is what I'm working with today.
Yeah.
Because the problem is, if we don't work towards acceptance, I'm saying work towards because I think saying we need to accept this. I do think that's quite a tall order. Whereas I think if we can say I'm working towards acceptance, maybe feels a bit more attainable. But without acceptance, your energy will be spent judging yourself, bargaining with yourself, pushing yourself, comparing yourself, repeatedly trying to prove that you should or can do more. That's a lot of energy that is being spent on that. Whereas working towards acceptance, well, that might be some energy that could be saved or harnessed for other things. But I also want to caveat that with acceptance could be dangerous if it kind of tipped too far the other way, where if someone says, oh, I've got this health condition or this neurotype, therefore I can't do that, or that's always going to be hard for me.
I
There
wouldn't
may
see that
be
as acceptance.
no, but
No.
some
Yeah.
people might, well,
Yeah.
I can't do that because
Yeah.
I've got this or I've got that.
Yeah.
I want to be cautious to be nuanced here. There may genuinely be some things, but on the whole, people might then fall a bit more into, oh, I've just got to accept this is my lot and it's not ever going to change and I can't do said things. Whereas actually, you might well be able to. They might need to be done differently or they might need accommodations for you to do so. But I think it would be very easy to go even more into despairing if we are of the mindset of, oh, well, this is just it then. And that's too difficult for me. I can't do that.
And it might be that that's a stage that people go through.
Mm,
I can't think of anything specific, but I'm sure I've had phases where I've felt like, oh, I can't do this. Or, well, probably even like small talk's probably a good example is like, oh, I'm autistic. That's why I can't do small talk. I'll never be able to do small talk. But actually, it's a skill that you can learn gradually, perhaps, if you want to. And it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be different for everybody, isn't it? Yeah, it is a tricky one, acceptance. But yeah, I really do think people hear it quite often, like I said before, as like, I'm okay with this. But I don't see it as that. I see it as, so another type of therapy that I do, the workshop that I'm going to on Thursday and Friday is family constellations. And what they talk about is I'll agree to it. Like, I'll agree these are the facts, which
mm,
sometimes people can find a bit easier. Sometimes people find that harder. So maybe there's something about experimenting with your language around it. What is the word that you can use there? Or like you said, like I'm working towards acceptance. Or maybe just being aware that you're I'm resisting acceptance at the moment, even though I can see that the situation is what it is. And I guess then there is that in that phase, you can be curious about what is it costing you to not accept it, and
mm,
what is it protecting you from to not accept it, and all those kinds of things.
mhm. Yeah. There's so many layers to this. And I feel like there are more, as always. It feels like we've scratched the surface and it feels like there are some very real
Mhm.
issues as well that like we've not touched upon just in terms of ableism, in terms of quality of life, in terms of finances. Unfortunately, green stuff makes the world go round, when it impacts your ability to earn.
You mean money?
It's
I thought you
scary,
meant
it's huge.
you meant money. I thought you meant eco-friendly things.
Oh, did you? Eco-friendly things make the world go round.
I was like, what? Do they?
I meant money, money, money. Yeah. So I do want to acknowledge that, but this is just something that I just see people talking about a lot. And sometimes I think it's important to. I feel like we talk about a lot of important stuff on the podcast, but sometimes we come at it from, when I say a lighter angle, I don't mean we don't do it justice, but you and I tend to just bring the humor or whatever and talk about it. And I'm just conscious that sometimes actually we just need to talk about stuff that just feels a bit heavy and less humor, more realness as to, this is just difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's a balance. I guess part of what I think about is that humor and hope can sometimes be an antidote to the despair, or can be something keeping you afloat in a sea of
Yeah.
despair. So there's
Yes.
the need to have the both. And I feel like we do go deep. I felt like I went pretty deep earlier when, I don't know, I just remember feeling like, wow, this is a lot of despair. I want to pull back from this a bit. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes it is just hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I suppose, if anything, I hope that this episode helps people feel a bit less alone.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've ever felt like you're too tired to be the person you want to be, like you've made ambitious plans from the sofa, imagined 17 different careers, and then needed a lie down after answering 2 emails,
Maybe that's not a sign you need more discipline, motivation, or positive thinking. Maybe it's a sign that your desires are bigger than your current capacity, and you're grieving the distance between the life you imagined and the energy you actually have.
next time we're diving into 2 conflicted about my values, for anyone who knows what matters to them but finds their values compete with each other. forever, or that there simply isn't enough time, energy, or capacity to live them all in a way they would like.
Before we go, we'd love you to come and join our Substack community. Too Much Apparently is a little community space for fellow muchlings where we share journal prompts for every episode, host community chats, and share early updates on new episodes and live events. If you'd like to stay connected between episodes, go to toomuchapparently.com for all the links, or click the link in the show notes.
And if this episode made you feel a bit less alone, subscribe, rate the podcast, and follow Too Much Apparently on Instagram and TikTok. Those small clicks help other sensitive humans find us.
But for now, we'll leave you with this. If you stopped measuring yourself against everything you could do in an ideal body, an ideal brain, or an ideal life, which parts of you would still be worth making space for now?